gonna do it.
Do we have a delay in our audio? Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Before we jump into our agenda, we do have to recognize that it is our superintendent's birthday this evening. So Dr. Sue, on behalf of the school district, we wish you a very happy birthday. We won't embarrass you with a singing of happy birthday, but would everyone join me in a round of applause for our superintendent?
Thank you so much, Chair, and the board, and for your lovely gifts here. I truly am feeling very blessed today, and so can't think of a better way to spend my day than literally than here doing our work together. So thank you so much.
Well, note to future boards, schedule school board meetings on Dr. Ricky Smith's birthday. She appreciates it.
She likes it.
All right, with that, I will call this meeting of the Tigard-Tualatin School Board to order at 7:01 p.m. Dr. Ricky Smith, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Chair.
With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Motion's been made by Director Jaimes and seconded by Director Urban. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll move to a choral vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. The agenda has been approved. With that, we will start off with recognition and good news, Women's History Month, with presenter Lisa Burton and Director Tracy Rose.
And our site. Good evening, Chair Bowman and directors. Please. That one. Thank you. This evening, we are going to share with you our agenda for the month in celebrating Women's History Month. What we've done is we've reached out to the women in leadership at the district to ask who has influenced them in their lives and inspired them in their careers and their paths. And so we are going to start off today. Do we click? Next slide. By sharing a little bit of information with you about the women behind our two elementary schools.
All right. So I'm known to most Tigard students as the Arbor Day Lady. Mary A. Woodward spent the majority of the 23 years she lived in Tigard promoting conservation and beautification of the community. Each year at Templeton Elementary School, Miss Woodward collected a penny apiece from every first grade student and then put the money toward the purchase of a tree, which was painted on the school grounds in the spring. She was instrumental in obtaining landscape materials for city parks, including the 1,000 fir trees planted by Templeton students at Cook Park. And Mary Woodward Elementary was named after her. And then next, Alberta Ryder Elementary, named after the woman who owned the land where Alberta Ryder was built. And when deciding to sell the land to the school district, Mrs. Ryder thought about the children and knew that they should be the ones to have her little corner of heaven. Her message to the children is that I love them and I am glad that they are in my backyard.
So the rest of the slides that we'll share this evening, we're just going to briefly share a quote from each of the women that are represented. We will share this presentation with all of you so you can read the full stories that were provided to us and then watch throughout the month because we'll be highlighting them on the district social media. So we're going to start with our director, Jill Zershny. Every strong woman probably stands on the shoulders of her mothers. I know I do.
And then Dr. Sue Ricky Smith. She is a constant model of strength and persistence, tempered by compassion for all she meets.
Amber Fields, Director of Secondary College and Career. She graduated high school at 16, applied early admittance to college at UW, had 2 kids by 21, and instead of taking time off, brought us to class with her.
Tristan Irwin,
Oh, here.
School Board Director.
Sorry. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Oh.
Oh, almost.
While we often look to those who have come before us as people to learn from, I regularly look at her and wonder what can she teach me.
And then this one up here. So her too.
She taught and lived in a way that showed me that as a woman, I can take up more space in this world and to use my voice. I do not need to stay small to make others feel more comfortable.
Jordan Mills, Principal, Bridgeport Elementary. Wendy Ballard Turner is my mom and my inspiration for a career that serves students and families. She was a social worker and launched the district's first resource center 29 years ago.
Dr. Lisa McCall, Assistant Superintendent. This person has been a mentor to me when I started my career as an assistant principal. I was fortunate to be chosen to be her assistant principal and learn things from her that are not taught in an administration educational program.
Sue Scott, interim principal at Templeton Elementary. Her continued commitment to absolve gender inequality, all while putting the needs of others in front of her own, instilled in me a certain passion for human service and a deeper concern for the health of humanity.
Debbie Ebert, Director of Human Resources. She fought for me from day one as a young mother. Only 19 years old, she put her dreams on hold for me, a sacrifice I hold dear.
Zinnia Un, Director of Equity and Inclusion. As a leader, I am grateful every day to have amazing women leaders who have encouraged me to be authentically me.
Cleanne Brewer, Principal, Durham Elementary. Natasha Butler taught me to be strong and tender, fierce and kind, humorous and far-reaching, putting humanity at the center of our leadership together. She listened when I needed mentorship, asked questions when I showed bias, and reminded me never to accept being silenced or ignored.
Corey Waffle, Principal, Deer Creek Elementary. I am fortunate to have a family of strong women who have guided me into becoming the woman I am today.
Jessica Swindle, Principal, Metzger Elementary. She showed us all how to truly walk the walk as educators who believe that all means all and that every child deserves the highest quality education each day.
Carol Kench, Director of Student Services. Pietra, am I saying? Patria, I apologize. Insisted that the strong teacher collaboration, meaningful family partnerships, and high expectations, students with disabilities would benefit from the rich opportunities of the general education program. And there you have it. We will be featuring these stories and more throughout the month on the social media, district social media platforms.
What a beautiful way to start the meeting. That was very cool. Thank you very much for your work on that. Okay, it is now time for the student representative reports. At least one of our students is unable to join because of tests and essays due this week, so the right choice was made there. Mahathi may be joining us, but Henry's update should be in all the board's inbox and will be included in the minutes of the meeting. Okay, with that, I'll hand it to Dr. Ricky Smith for superintendent report.
Thank you so much. Given the length of my report that will be next, I'll defer my time to the board.
Board members, board reports. It's only been 6 days since we.
It's actually been really busy. The SRO task force is continuing to meet, met last week. I also had the opportunity to attend the Tigard's State of the City, the late night in Tigard presentation. That was a lot of fun to watch. And I just got out of the OSBA Washington County listening session. The primary concerns expressed there were about workforce retention and how to get the people we need into the buildings and keep the people we've got in the buildings safe and happy and well paid.
The only update I wanted to share was the city of Tigard held their annual State of the City address, Late Night in Tigard, in a virtual format, and it was an excellent report. And there's a lot to be proud of going on in the city of Tigard. So congratulations to the city for that. Anything to add from colleagues? Okay. With that, we will move to reports and discussion part 1, proposed district COVID mitigation plan. Presenter Dr. Sue Ricky-Smith.
Or if I could have you put up the slides, please. Thank you. Well, good evening, Chair and Board. It is a pleasure to share with you the TTSD COVID mitigation plan. This plan has been for your review and discussion, as well as any questions or concerns or revisions that you would have for us. I want to start by saying my thanks to this team, the cabinet team here, and many of our teachers and staff, and certainly to our association partner. I see that our president from TTEA is Scott Heron is with us this evening. There have been a multitude of stakeholders who have provided input and thoughts as we have been developing this plan. And I wish to say thank you to all of them for their work and their commitment in putting together what I think is hopefully you will see as a balanced and thoughtful plan. Next slide, please, Thor. Let's just quickly step through how we arrived here today. Literally a month ago today, on February 7th, OHA announced the lifting of the state mask rule 333-019-1015, which in essence returns local control of COVID mitigation. I know there's been a tremendous amount said relative to masking, but that is only one small piece of a much larger responsibility that districts now incur, meaning that not just districts, but counties, municipalities, K-12 education, that at that time, on March 31st, and based on forecasted decline in COVID hospitalizations, with a goal of getting to 400 or less of hospital beds committed to COVID care, that would be the date in which local control would be returned. That was revised on March 24th to March 19th because the decline was so rapid in terms of just number of positive cases of COVID and resulting hospitalizations that again on February 28th, we had an update lifting it, the mask rule once again to March 11th at 11:59 p.m., effectively making it the early morning of March 12th. On March 2nd, ODE released an update aligned with OHA's guidance and with CDC rule. And so we have now the latest iteration of Ready School Safe Learners resiliency framework that is also called out in the district plan. Next slide, please. The key concepts here are 3. First, that as we were building this plan, we prioritized the health and safety of students and staff. That is anchored in the current local COVID transmission data as determined by the CDC, which I will show you in a moment, and informed by how individual schools are responding to that particular level within the school, so the school conditions. TTSD also prioritizes and protects in-person instruction. We know that because it is the most effective model to support students' social and emotional health, development, and academic success. And 3, that as we were building this plan, that we use the equity lens, student and staff safety, and community public health lenses in conjunction with Washington County Public Health partners in the development and in ultimately the implementation of the district COVID mitigation plan on March 14th. Next slide, please. This is the latest way in which the CDC will measure current conditions on the ground for nationally. I have received, as you have received, multiple emails over the last 2 years. Why do we not follow the CDC guidance? And we have followed it through the lens of OHA's interpretation. However, now we have a direct line to the CDC. And so the anchor for this plan is anchored within the CDC COVID-19 community levels. And here you will see a chart that says when the community levels are low, there is no recommendation relative to masking or other mitigation efforts. When we are in a medium, which the time that this slide was produced, Washington County and the time that counties were in the medium, if you are immune suppressed or high risk for severe disease, it is your responsibility to connect with your healthcare provider and ask whether or not you need to wear a mask. And then if you are in the high level, it is highly recommended that you wear a well-fitting mask when you are indoors with public, regardless of vaccination status, including K-12. Next slide, please.
So Dr. Sue,
Yes.
those
Backslide.
recommendations, those are the CDC recommendations.
Those are the CDC's recommendation. That is correct. And every state has a county map that looks like this, and it is colored similarly based on, and these, thank you for the question, Chair, because these are based on the current number of beds that are dedicated to COVID care.
Okay.
What CDC is working on, much like what Oregon has been committed to for the last 2 years, is trying to preserve to the best of their ability hospital beds for all types of care that they are responsible for delivering, such as for heart attack and emergency surgeries and cancer care, diabetic care, renal failure. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And we have seen, unfortunately, to this last point, when we were under Delta surge, that ICU beds came at a premium even for pediatric populations. And they were forced to go to what was known as a crisis of care standard, meaning that some individuals would not receive care. Next slide, please. This slide, I think, is also important to share and was shared with us by ODE and OHA. This comes from Oregon's or OHSU. And so you read the gray is the number of individuals who are either have passive, meaning they have become ill with COVID, or active immunization or immunity against COVID through vaccination. The blue sliver that you see there are those that are still actively infected, and the orange are the number ones who are susceptible to being infected. And so when you go to the far, what would be my far left, potentially I'm trying to think your far right, and you see mostly orange, that was back at the last surge a year ago in December, January, when we did not have vaccinations available to us. You can see that over time with vaccination efforts, and sadly, some people have contracted the disease, and as we have changed variants and we have had breakthrough, but not serious disease, the gray area continues to expand. So that currently, and this slide needs to be updated even from a week ago, we are now sitting at 13% of the population that is still susceptible. And that includes everyone from across the state from 0 to 4 years of age who are not eligible for vaccination, as well as those who have not yet been vaccinated, 5 to 11 or older, as well as those who, again, either haven't chosen to be vaccinated or have not yet contracted the disease.
So the sharp spike there would be Omicron, essentially?
I'm sorry?
The sharp spike there would be Omicron?
Yes, what you see there, and that was, it was not unexpected, but it actually benefited us in the sense that because of its high transmissibility and thank goodness its low mortality, it was able to leave more of an immunized status behind than with Delta, which would not have been the case.
Got it.
Other questions before I move on? Thor, please, next slide. Here is another, so CDC is the anchor, taking a look at what our immunity status is statewide, and I will share with you that 74% currently of students and not quite 99% of all staff are currently vaccinated. And that means, by definition, that means have completed a full series. We only have in the state in general around 24% who have been boosted. And we know that the population that continues to lag is ages 5 to 11, and I'll address that later. So those two pieces of data, what does the CDC say? Where does the CDC say we are? What is our generalized immunity relative to being able to deal with the disease? And then 3, what does our county data say? And you can see here again to what would be my far right, your far left. That is the Omicron spike. You can see the sort of that lump, that hump before we get to the spike. That was Delta. So you can see again how highly transmissible Omicron was, but it did exactly what it was forecasted to do, which is straight up and straight down. And so this is as of last week. That last data point is almost to pre-Omicron levels, and I would expect that the slide that we receive, the update we receive tomorrow, will be below that. And hospitalizations are following that. Hospitalizations typically follow 2 weeks after we see the previous week's data. Next slide, please. We also take a look at what the conditions are within the schools. And this should be well known to all of our community. We post this on a weekly basis. And I want to say again, a profound thanks to Tracy, to Lisa Burton, and to Gustavo. They're on their team. Every Friday, they crank these numbers based on reports from our schools. Not only is there a collective, which you see over here to my left, your right, but to the chart to my right, your left, you will see individual school reports. And this is where we will direct, again, continue to direct families. Pay attention to what the conditions are in your school as you are making a choice, that you have all the information to help you make a well-informed choice. One of the changes will certainly be that and I'll get to this in a moment, but quarantine will no longer be tracked in the new plan, and I'll explain why that is. Next slide, please. And then also the district survey. And so you can see here that we had, I'm just looking at the data, about 2,600 plus individuals, parents, staff, and students who responded to the survey. You can see the feedback in the middle slide, and both in the middle slide and in the slide to the far right. And this was also posted in the community newsletter on Friday. We were purposeful in not asking, do you want masking or not? Because we realized that could be a polarizing question. The question we asked was, if we were to go this direction, what would you need to know about that? And many families, and we appreciate all of the parent input and the staff and student, really would tell us immediately what their choice was and what they also needed relative to that stance. And the overwhelming almost 2-to-1 was, I want the choice. It wasn't necessarily I don't want masks, but I want the choice. And you can see that we did have a concerted section that said, yes, I don't want masks. And you see that in the 51%. All right. Versus the 21 who said, please stay masked. Okay, questions about that data? So CDC, community, county data, school data, and now parent data, parent, student, staff data.
I do just want to note, board members should have received each and every comment in the Excel format that I think Director Rhodes put forward. So we've read all of the individual comments.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah, I think it's helpful and it's informative because, again, the transition that we are recommending this evening to the board is major for many people. Just as the mental health was impacted going into the conditions that we had, so too it will be when we come out of them. Okay, and we want to be thoughtful about that. Next slide, please. And so the key concept here is that TTSD is committed to ensuring that every school and district work site is safe, back to our first priority, and is welcoming to students and staff, parents and visitors, and honors their individual decision around COVID-19 safety, including the use of masks. We also will continue to welcome those who also demonstrate respect for individual choice into our school community. And so we'll speak to that in just a few moments, but by that I mean we welcome whether you choose to remain masked or whether you choose not to mask under certain conditions. And we expect our community that comes within our doors to do the same. Next slide, please. I know you have seen my Swiss cheese many, many times, and I want to go back over that again, just as a reminder that all of these layers continue to be impactful relative to how we will manage COVID-19 should we see the next surge. And one of the things that I want to really reiterate, and I heard it again this evening from Dr. Walensky on the evening news, and last evening on a 60-minute presentation with Dr. Walensky and the CDC, that this does not by any stretch of the imagination signal that the pandemic is over. We are at a stage where we believe and we are hopeful that we may be moving to endemic, but time will tell. That being said, it is now a time for us to take a breath, literally, and choose to make masking a choice. And so you will see under the mask piece of cheese, if you will, that will be either encouraged or not, or required, depending on where we are with COVID-19 in the schools. You will notice under the slice, it says fast and sensitive testing and tracing. That continues. Buy Next Now tests will be available as on a diagnostic basis, not on a test to stay, as well as the OHSU PCR weekly test. And there is still opportunity for parents to sign into that if they have not already. Under the slice, it says quarantine and isolation. There will no longer be quarantine of those who are exposed. It will only be isolation of those who are test positive and or have symptoms. And vaccine, the last slice, continues to be parental choice. I've received many emails saying don't mandate vaccines, and we are not. That continues to be choice. Next slide, please.
Dr. Sue, sorry
Yes.
for interrupting.
Not at all.
Vice Chair Lynn has joined us by Zoom, and Vice Chair Lynn, I just want to make sure that you can hear and speak if you have any questions.
Good evening, Dr. Lynn.
Good evening. Sorry I was late. The other meeting ran a little long, but no questions. This is all very clear. Great. And I can see everything wonderfully.
Perfect. Thanks for being here while you're on your business trip. We appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, with that, here are basically the basics of the plan. With optional masking, test to stay is no longer useful. It was only useful when we knew we had universal masking and then trying to figure out where the leak in the system was. TTSD will continue, though, as I said, to provide diagnostic testing for students and staff who develop symptoms during the school day and through the OHSU weekly screening program. Quarantine for students and staff who have been potentially exposed and contact tracing will no longer be required per OHA, and those two practices will end at this time on the 14th. District and school notification to parents will always be made of a possible exposure. We think that is our duty to do so. That allows parents to ask the right questions and to seek the right information from us, and then as they choose how they wish to proceed. At school, testing will be available for students exhibiting symptoms at school. Isolation of student and staff with a positive test results will be for a period of 5 days, as guided by the CDC, and be enforced per board policy JHCC, which gives us, which directs us to contain and control communicable diseases, of which COVID-19 is listed first. This includes extracurricular school activities and athletics for that 5-day period.
Okay. Question. This is very helpful information. So district will continue to notify parents of possible exposure. How will we determine possible exposure? What will if a kid in my class gets COVID, does the entire class get?
Or if the child presents themselves or a staff member presents themselves to the office and says, I need a test, I think I have, and we get a positive test, then yes, we would absolutely notify that is the case. Or if that information is provided to us by a family member.
So, but would it be if I'm in a 3rd grade class and a student gets a positive COVID test, does every other student in that class get a notification?
Correct. That is correct.
And what about students on a bus?
Same, that would be same.
Okay.
Yeah, same protocols. It's just that this time we're not doing extensive contact tracing to say who is in proximity to who.
It's
It
just
is
more
more
of
of a blanket. Correct.
And then if any of the students in that class request a test to see if they have got it, have
Yes,
those available.
exactly right. That is precisely right. We
And
would
they
have
just
that available at the school where we could go ahead and test. When we get a little further in, I will share with you our next steps relative to also providing families who request a test a kit that contains 2 tests. Okay. Next slide, please. So the mitigation efforts that are still in our tool chest are physical distancing wherever possible, continued use of our ventilation and HVAC strategies. As you know, we have increased the amount of air exchange that occurs. Unfortunately, sometimes it's cool in the morning and warmer in the afternoon to make that happen. And we've also placed ionization units onto our HVAC systems. We have the OHSU weekly PCR screening tests. We have diagnostic rapid tests. So that's the Buy Next Now for students and staff who are exhibiting symptoms or request that they be tested. 5-day isolation of students and staff with a positive test. And that is an expectation. Indoor masks as informed by the CDC and school data, and I'll speak to that in just a moment. Indoor extracurricular and athletic activities will be informed by the CDC and school data, and by that I mean if we have to tighten down on indoor spectators during a surge, that may be one of the strategies that we employ. Use of online instruction is our absolute last resort, but if it gets to a point like what we had in January, Where we had more students and staff who were falling ill, we may need to take a pause for a period of time while it runs through that building and we get through the potential incubation period and make sure that everybody's well and comes back in. And you saw us successfully use that with our middle and high schools, as well as with Durham Elementary.
Couple of questions on this slide. First, in terms of physical distancing, will teachers have requirements or recommendations in terms of
The
classroom?
recommendation in RSSL is that a minimum of 3 feet wherever possible.
So most classrooms will probably look
They're
the
already
same.
set up for that as are our lunch areas, correct?
Okay, second question is on the OHSU PCR testing. Do we know percent opt-in, who, like the number of students in the district?
I'll defer to Director Darren Bernard. Do we?
Percent that are
Number of our percent or total number of students who are participating in that program?
100%. It depends on the elementary. Mainly the elementaries.
Okay.
You have a large percentage. Some schools over 200 students in the elementaries.
Great.
Up to the high schools, you got some high schools with maybe 15 or 20 kids.
And-
Lower levels don't have as many. Probably more students are unvaccinated. The lower levels are high school levels and stuff. That's one of the reasons why, but it's still available. You can sign up every week if they choose to.
So who is eligible to sign up for that?
All students are eligible.
Okay, that would be great to see participation numbers.
It
climb
would.
up a little
And
bit.
again, that is parental choice.
Thank you.
Next slide. Thank you. So the key concepts continue here. Based on current Washington County today, we were on March 3rd, we were lowered from the medium to the low level. Beginning the week of March 14th, masks are optional for students and parents and vaccinated staff and volunteers per OAR 333-019-1030. Masks on school bus and district transportation is optional, also beginning the week of March 14th. The federal mandate for public transportation, such as TriMet and air travel, stays in force. Mask guidance will follow CDC and school conditions data. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here is the map as of March 3rd, and you can see that the TriMet area is now in the green, where before it was in the yellow, and the yellow areas have extended well into Southern Oregon, which were orange last week. And so the CDC has committed to updating this map on a weekly basis. And so that is, again, the first data point that we will take a look at, what is happening locally in our state relative to either the next variant or current conditions. Next slide, please. Again, we will also, if we see the map change, we will also be paying attention to the weekly reports that come out from the Northwest Regional ESD relative to county case counts. Next slide, please. In addition, we will pay attention individually to schools. And I'm sorry, yes.
At what level do we make the decision to say, go back to masking? If we're looking at this, is it what numbers are we using?
So Thor, can you advance me one more slide for a moment?
Sorry, did I get ahead of you?
Hang on, one more slide if you would. Okay, let me back up. So I would just want to make sure I wasn't, so if you could back me up one slide, please. Yeah, so to that point, Director Zerschmied, when we get to the orange area, which is a high, at that point, we will be paying very close attention to what's happening within the schools. Simply because the external area may be under a high alert, we will not automatically say at that point we need to immediately mask everyone up. We will take a look to see what's coming into the schools. And again, this depends on the choices that our parents and our community are making in the midst of a surge. If we see, as we did in January, that cases continue to multiply rapidly, then we will at that point say we need to mask up for a short period of time to get through this surge, and then wait for us to be on the backside of that, and then again loosen the reins to optional and choice. Because again, we're trying to protect in-person instruction, and when students are sick, when staff are sick, we can't do that. Okay. Next slide, please. The policies that also guide this plan have to do with both the staff and the student versions of communicable diseases, which are GBEB for staff, JHCC for students, and the hazing, harassment, and intimidation policy, GBNA for staff, and GFCF for students. And this has to do whether you are being bullied relative to wearing a mask or whether you're being bullied for not wearing a mask. Both if you'll go to the next slide, please, Thor. We have zero indifference to mask shaming on either side, whether you're student, staff, or community. The teachers will be providing social emotional learning lessons during class meetings that teach respect for individual mask choice. And again, the response relative to bullying types of behavior are guided by GBNA and JFCF. Director Darren Bernard has made certain that there are KN95s as well as surgical masks available at school and district sites. He has just today reinforced our Buy Next Now test kits, and they are the inventory has been increased in preparation for this shift. Mental health support for students and staff who are having difficulty with this transition, and it's totally understandable that they would, is also available, and we will keep a keen eye to make sure that both students and staff have access to that level of support. The district will continue to provide vaccination and booster clinics in partnership with Washington County Health Department for those who wish to avail themselves of it. And planning is already in progress for in-person high school proms and in-person graduation ceremonies. I know we all enjoyed the drive-bys, but it's time for us to come back in person. But should there be, the question has been asked of me multiple times, should there be another surge, and that is always possible, we will follow the CDC school condition mask guidance. So it may be that if we are in the midst of a surge, to continue in person, we will have to mask up for that event. Next slide, please. To ensure maximum safety for all when exercising choice, we ask our parents and staff and community to think about your personal practice during a surge in the community, because that has implications in bringing it into our school community. Students must not be sent to school if they're showing any symptoms that are related to COVID-19. If you believe that your child may be exposed and you need assistance in getting tested, we would much rather have you do that, and we will meet you at a place that does not expose the rest of the school community and support you, rather than have you send your child to school and then we discover that they are ill and then have to send them home. Students who have a positive COVID-19 test result must isolate through school, extracurricular and athletic activities for 5 days. They may return on day 6 if fever-free for the previous 24 hours without the use of a fever-reducing agent. All right. I would be remiss if I did not share with you relative to the limited liability law, HB 4402, which was voted into existence on December 22nd, 2020. Basically provided limited liability for COVID-related illnesses when the state is under emergency rule, which we were at that time. Once the governor lists the emergency rule, which we anticipate she will do either at the end of this month or the beginning of April, then that limited liability no longer exists. PACE does not, who is our insurer, does not provide liability coverage for claims due to communicable disease exposure of any type. So it's not just COVID-19, it's measles and whooping cough and pertussis and all the rest of those diseases. And we are in consultation with PACE regarding this plan.
So just a quick question on it. So if a student has COVID-19, they are obligated to communicate that to the district if they have a positive test.
We are asking for their respect of our process that yes, they would notify us. However, that we have our experience in the last 2 years, that has not always been the case.
So, but if we are aware of a student being positive for COVID-19, they're not allowed to attend school in person.
That is correct.
Until they've met those.
That is correct. And that is also provided for us in policy JHCC, that we have an obligation and a duty to isolate and to restrict access during the time that they have active disease.
And has our own district legal counsel reviewed whether or not we're meeting our obligation in terms of mitigation to satisfy?
We have not put the final plan in front of them until we put it in front of you first. But I believe that given the pieces that we have put forward here, that yes, that they would, our attorneys would believe that we have done our due diligence in terms of having systems in place to make clear the risks that parents are incurring.
So in effect, I mean, obviously we're doing more than we would in the case of, for example, a whooping cough.
Yes, this is far more extensive than we would do for whooping cough or measles or other issues. Correct. Next slide, please. Thank you for the question. So final thoughts. And again, Director Colt Gill from ODE said the same thing that Dr. Walensky said last evening and again this evening. This change does not signal the end of the pandemic. It is not the time to completely let our guard down. So we need to have, I believe Dr. Walensky said it best this evening when she said, you can put that mask in the drawer, but have it at the ready when it's needed. We need, and I'm asking for our community to assist us in demonstrating grace and patience while we are going through this transition so that we can support the mental, emotional, social health and well-being of the children that we serve and the staff who have faithfully served them in very challenging conditions over the past 2 years. That eligible students ages 5 and up should get vaccinated if they are not. And if they are 12 years or older and have been vaccinated, boosted, now is a great time to do that. The CDC is reviewing recent Pfizer data indicating the need for vaccine dose adjustment for 5 and 11-year-olds, as it appears the current dosage may not provide the length of protection as has once been thought. And the reason I speak to vaccination, and again, this is personal choice, it remains outside of getting the illness itself. It remains the best protection against serious illness, which results in hospitalization from COVID-19. And while we did not see the rates of ICU beds being taken up with Omicron, we did see significant numbers of beds pushing hard on the system, general care beds for COVID, which then precluded other types of care that could be delivered by our hospital system. And with that, next slide, please. I will entertain additional questions and comments.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I have a list of questions, but I want to open it up to colleagues to jump in first. Vice Chair Lynn had his hand up. Sorry about that. Vice Chair Lynn, take the floor.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. That was very comprehensive and clear. I had a question about I think you said somewhere that if a kid could the students who have a positive COVID test result must isolate from school, and they could return on day 6 if fever-free in the previous 24 hours. And it's my understanding that you can be COVID positive and never have a fever. So I wanted to know.
Yes, you can. And that question, thank you for the question, Vice Chair Lynn. In conversation with OHA, they believe whether fever was present or not, that 5 days, your viral load has sufficiently declined enough, probably somewhere below 30% at that point in time. You probably have a greater chance of getting hit on the freeway than you do of getting COVID from someone at that point in time. However, there are always outliers. And so I will not tell you that everyone will be in that condition, but the belief is based on the data, and again, this comes from the CDC, that based on the data, that by day 6, your viral load is significantly down, and the likelihood of you transmitting it to someone else is minimal at that point. Although there are outliers, we have seen cases where it has extended to 8-9 days in some cases, but those are rare. That's not the general response.
Thank you.
Director Jaimes.
I don't have any questions because it's pretty much straightforward working in a school building. So thank you so much for your thoughts and for the thoughtful work that all of you have put into this plan. So I'm glad that it's really been choice so that all of our parents can have that choice to send their kids to school with masks or not, and to be respectful of that choice as an individual. But my kids want to continue to mask, so I'm glad that everybody has that choice and that we're all going to be respectful.
Yeah, thank you, Director.
Yes, Director Urban.
Yeah, so echoing what colleagues have said, I think this is a really clear, concise plan that I think will answer a lot of concerns and questions. And I think, like for a lot of us, it's this funny time of sort of, like we said, it was hard when we switched to the masking, and it's a little bit weird switching back. And I think the point of having patience and grace and just sort of being okay with the process, knowing that it is rooted heavily in science and in choice is really critical, and I think will be helpful for a lot of families. I did have one, I'll have one question I'll ask now, which is in terms of our teachers and staff, are there other, I mean, for those of us that would be not concerned, but a little bit worried with all of the potential unmasking, are there additional supports or strategies or something that will be there for them so they feel like, besides them wearing their own mask, that they will feel fine with whatever their classroom community looks like in terms of masked and non-masked individuals?
Thank you for that. And I think that's the importance of the SEL lessons as a basis for that. We also have the freestanding or the singular standing HEPA filters that are available, and teachers have purchased those with their PEF funds. And we have many of those in inventory, as well as filters that can be changed out. And Director Darren Bernard is the one that they should direct that question to. I think certainly if they're having any concerns whatsoever, they need, as always, take it immediately to their administrator and work with the district team in consultation so that we can work through whatever concerns they have. Again, I want to iterate that our staff have had a very heavy burden over the last 2 years. Over the last 2 years, have handled it with amazing grace and persistence and care for their students, many times at the cost of their own personal care. And so we want to be very thoughtful and continue to let them know that we are here to support them to the best of our ability. And that when we, as we assume local control, this is where our parental and our community partnerships are going to loom large. We are asking them to make responsible choices relative to what's best for their child in terms of masking and in terms of other things that they can do to keep the disease at bay when it is in our, and keep it out of our community, so that we can remain in person and teachers can feel and classified staff can feel that it is a safe environment, along with all the other mitigation efforts that we continue to employ.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I just want to clarify, we are not requiring a student or staff member who has been infected, we are not requiring them to provide a negative test before they come back into the building.
That is correct. We are not.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned supports that will be available. So can you walk me through what those supports might look like for, say, a student who has who is herself medically fragile, who has a medically fragile family member living at home?
Correct.
What sort of supports might be available for a student like that, whose family feels that the student going masked to school is not going to be sufficient protection? What might we be able to
I think
do
that is an individual need conversation with the families, and we have had several of those. If the student is in within our student services, our specialized programming through special ed, those teachers and staff are masked with those students in very specific classrooms. But if a parent comes to us and says, I'm concerned because we have this going on, that's a need conversation with the principal, and then either Dr. McCall or Director Kinch or whoever can provide the best technical information to them about all of the options that we want to understand and tailor it individually to the individual. So the broad brush here is your specific needs. We will have that conversation with you at the school site, one-on-one, and relative to what that might look like. It could be a variety of things.
Okay. So any parent watching tonight should consult with their local.
Correct. If they have that, if they
get
have
all
those concerns and conditions, yes, they should.
Okay, so I have a few questions. A couple are granular, and then a couple are more specific. So first, and this might be a Director Bernard question, but you mentioned that we've got masks and tests. Are we anticipating do we feel solid on our supply chain of accessing those if there is a spike in need that comes up, or do we have a stockpile of some kind reserved?
Yeah, we have a stockpile. So we've got about 175,000 non-surgical masks in stock right now, plus what's out in the buildings. We also just received 80,000 additional K95 mask, I talked about 150,000 that we currently have in stock. So we're trying to stay ahead of that and monitor how fast they're being used. We can get them fairly quick right now, and we're just trying to keep up with that in stock.
That is fantastic news. If you couldn't hear that online, we do have a large stockpile of masks. What about tests?
So yes, we have a large stockpile of masks, both non-surgical and K95, and we'll continue to just monitor those. Tests, we continue to order those. So we have, I was just trying to do it in my head right now, we probably have about 6,000 of basically it's a 2-pack of tests. Those originally were available for test to stay. Now that things are shifting, we'll try to determine how we're going to use those. We also have our nurses keep really a good supply in the schools of our Buy Next Now testing. So they're, schools range anywhere from 100 to probably 400 or 500 tests on hand at any one time. So we feel pretty good about those, and knock on wood, those have been, when I order a set, I get them within probably 2 or 3 weeks. So we just try to stay ahead, don't get too low in inventory, and just check weekly.
That is very reassuring. My second question was sort of aligned to that a little bit. What is the threshold that has to be met if a staff or student wants to use a diagnostic test? Can they just walk in and say, I think I might have been exposed, I'd like to take a test? And so that, okay, great.
Yes.
That's a yes. Okay, zooming out a little bit. You mentioned that you would like parents to be paying attention to the dashboard as they're making choices about what's best for their child in terms of masking. Is there a threshold of student or of school level spread that would trigger, communication from the principal or a letter home of some kind?
Thank you for the question. And I would be hard pressed. We have talked about hard numbers. I think that the challenge then becomes, well, if you're one off of the threshold number, is that sufficient or not for some in our community? And so what we take a look at again is what is the impact on our ability to run in-person instruction in that school? So if we have attendance rates that are well below, 80%, 90, we're at 90%, and then we see we're dropping to 85, and then we're dropping to 80. That's going to be a trigger for us to do a deeper dive and to take a hard look at what's going on, not just in terms of student infections, but also in terms of staff. This is a similar pattern that we saw during Omicron in January, where one or 2 days we were in good shape, and by the end of the week we were not. And the thing about what epidemiologists believe are the next iteration, whenever that is to occur, is that it will be, again, something like an Omicron that's highly transmissible and runs very quickly. And this is the reason why contact tracing and quarantine do not work, because by the time you figure out who the last contacts were, the infection has doubled or tripled or quadrupled because of the rate of transmissibility. And you noticed in that one slide that I showed you that spike in number of cases was far greater, 2-3-fold greater than Delta was, because Delta was designed for very severe illness and mortality. Omicron sacrificed a lot of that so they could be more transmissible.
So a related question, I think this is what Director Searchmead was asking, I wasn't clear on the answer. So if CDC's community spread for Washington County goes up to high,
Correct.
does that automatically trigger a return?
It will
to
not
masks?
automatically trigger unless I see the same result in our schools.
Okay. And
We will have a thoughtful conversation with the principal and saying, what is going on in your school? Can we continue to still run with optional masking at that point in time, knowing that maintaining choice, or are we to a point? Because when we have to if we have to absolutely mask up, I want it for as short a period of time as possible.
I appreciate that. Well, then, I don't expect an answer or response on this now, but for both of those questions, notifying parents and flip to masks, having some sort of protocol in place. If it's not a threshold of positive cases, maybe it's that combined with staff availability.
It's a combination of all of those factors.
But if we
Correct.
could have that firmed up, so if we are in that situation, we have something we can refer to, I think that would be
We will
useful.
do our absolute best, Chair. I cannot guarantee you that it will be hard and fast. I think it will be as close as we can get until we actually have to live through that.
Sure. Fair enough. Okay, two more questions. Just a broad question. I assume you've been hearing from your colleagues in other school districts. Are we broadly aligned in TTSD with what
Yes.
other districts, or are there variations that you're seeing?
There are, no, all of us are moving in the direction of optional masking and choice. None of us have had the opportunity because we've all been very quickly trying to try to efficiently and effectively get our plans together for presentation to our boards prior to the 14th. We certainly were one of the first districts in the TriMet area that signaled that we were, examining this possibility. And so we were a little bit further ahead than others. But I would tell you that in conversation with my peers, that all of us have pretty much the same anchors and same concepts in the plan. It just may translate slightly differently if you're in Hillsborough or in Beaverton, as they are much larger districts.
Totally. Okay, thank you. And then final question is an academic question. And I know we're sort of living this already, so it won't be a shift, but I was hoping you could give a touch on, as we see spread, an automatic missing 5 days of school has a pretty significant academic impact on kids. So what is the protocol? I mean, you could have a teacher who's going to have, 7 different groups of students who are at different places in the lesson plan at every given point based on absences. So what is the basic protocol for a teacher for dealing with spread within a classroom?
It's the same protocol that we put in place and that Director Robson, and I'm looking, there he is, thank you. Director Robson can probably give you a little more detail to that, but that we put together this fall relative to a care team for the student. So to try to mitigate some of that for the teachers so that they would not have, as you described it, these various shot or like a shot graph, where you've got students all over the place. Director Robson, would you like to speak more clearly to that?
Yeah, great question. And this from the onset in terms of quarantining, and that a plan has been in place that really emphasizes school teams and principal designating that school team and contacts very specifically with kids who are in the situation where they're not coming to school, and really setting up a plan for the student and making sure that plan includes consistent contact with family, and then also making sure that they can access through Canvas or through the platforms that are in place to be able to ensure that they've had that connection point to be sure that they're engaging to the extent that they can. Also keeping in mind that connection lets school understand the severity of the illness, not expecting kids in a quarantine situation to always get things in on time and that kind of thing, but rather to what extent can you engage? If you can, let's make sure you're connected to school.
That's helpful. So I really appreciate that variation too, based on how the student is feeling. Let's say that there's a student who is asymptomatic but positive. That family could reasonably expect a teacher to reach out to them to help them come up with a plan for how to spend those 5 days.
Yeah, if they're not coming to school, absolutely. Same plan in place. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Those were my questions. Director Urban.
So to that point, I sort of partially lived through that. And it was there's somebody besides the teacher or the principal that sends home the letter, the work, here's kind of a schedule. Now this is elementary level, but it really does, and that's a contact person outside of their teacher. So there are a few people working together to make sure that student knows this is what you're doing at this time during the day. This is what the expectations are for work. Here's the Canvas or the Seesaw. So it's very well oiled, I think, in terms of that system. That was great. I was also going to say, and I have one more question. If people missed it, there are another 4 tests available that you can get from the covidtest.org site.
Yes.
They opened up a second set, so
Yes.
along with all the school tests, we can get another 4 per household. And then my other question was, we talked about prom and graduation, and fingers crossed all those continue in person. What about, especially like at the elementary and middle school levels, those events like the—
Absolutely.
Okay.
All of that is back on track. And again, like I said, the only thing that might change is relative to what our conditions are, but not in the sense of shutting those things down, but in the sense of going back to mass for a short period of time.
And then for school volunteers, are there any specific protocols that they fall besides?
As long as they are, again, if they are vaccinated, they get to make the same choice as our teachers who are vaccinated.
So one of the things that I'm hearing is that because we now have local control, we also have the responsibility to communicate out to the public. what
Absolutely.
What our current control is. So it sounds like we're gonna have, our communication team is gonna be switching from contact tracing to communicating with parents. And so the flip side of that then is that parents and community members really need to get in the habit of coming to the district website to find the
That is
latest and
correct.
greatest
All the information, in fact, as you know, Director Zerchman, I thank you for that, for putting a pin there. When you take a look at that page just on COVID alone, you see all the various areas where you can gather information, many of which were asked or requested within the survey, which made it clear that we still are not getting people firmly attached to that page and paying attention to it. So we will double down on that effort to make sure that parents understand everything from, what are the symptoms to how do I receive care, to how do I get tests, to where are there vaccinations, or what else do I need to understand about various mitigation. I mean, it's an incredibly rich page of information and that we, again, when you want to assume choice, you want to make sure that you are making a fully informed choice, and everything that you could possibly need is there in terms of guiding the best choice that you can make for you and your family and your child, unless you have something that's very specific. And again, then we will counsel one-on-one if you connect with your principal and let them know that they need that support. But I appreciate you saying that.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Ricky Smith.
Thank you,
I guess
Board.
last thing is if a parent is watching this evening and has questions that weren't addressed, is the principal of their school the touch
Principal
point?
is the first, is where we would ask them to start, because that helps us to see this school by school, what the questions continue to be and what clarity we need to bring in our communications.
Excellent. Thank you for answering all our questions, and cabinet as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so with that, we will close the report and discussion items part 1, and we will move to public comment part 1 for current agenda items only. Okay, so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks signed up for public comment this evening. I will read the first name order just so folks know who they come after. Gabby will be first, Aaron will be second, Chris will be third, Joshua will be fourth, Diane will be fifth, and Janet will be sixth. And then we have one non-agenda public comment item, which will happen after the next report and discussion item, and that will be Lenore. Okay, so I will read our protocol for public comments and then invite the first person to come to the table. The Tigard-Tualatin School Board holds its meetings in public, meaning that the business of the board is conducted as an open meeting for the public to observe as required by law. However, regular public comment at board meetings is a policy choice of the board, not a legal requirement. As the board values input from our students, parents, and district community members that we serve, the board provides these opportunities for community members to provide input on important topics. In addition to public comment, community members may submit written comments to the board secretary at each meeting or email comments directly to the board. I do want to note for board members, we do have 2 written comments for this evening's board meeting. The email addresses of the school board can be found on the district website. Again, this section is for agenda items only for public comment. Non-agenda items will follow later. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes each and should be brief and concise as required by policy. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations or programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning specific district personnel. We are also unable to hear praise or commendations about district personnel, but we do invite you to submit commendations to the district superintendent. If this public comment agenda item exceeds 30 minutes, which it should not, so I'll skip that section. So a few ground rules. 1, please wear your mask when you speak and speak directly into the microphone. As long as the green light is on in front of you, the microphone is on and you can be a normal distance from the microphone. Please share your zip code before you begin your comments. Director Zerchmead is sitting at the end of the table. She will be timing each person's public comments. She'll hold a 1-minute card up to let you know you have 1 minute left. And she'll also hold up a card to let you know that your time is up. You'll probably also hear her cell phone ringing. When the alarm sounds, your time is up, so please wrap up your comments. If you would like your public comment to be recorded in the meeting minutes, please provide a written copy to our board secretary, Patty Roberts, sitting at the end. Please know that this is an opportunity for the board to listen to the community. We as a board in general do not engage in dialogue during this portion. Instead, we are here to listen. And as always, additional comments can be submitted to the school board via email. All right, with that, we will move to our first public commenter. Gabby, you may come forward. And so take your time, and basically once you begin speaking with your zip code, Director Zerschmied will begin the timer. So feel free to get settled and just make sure the green light is on. Okay.
My name is Gabriella Miller, 97223. And I just wanted to voice my support of making masks optional for children. I have two young children, 5 and 7 years old. And so I'm happy to see this transition back to optional masking. And I hope to see the plan evolve to offer more resources to students to get them caught back up to speed. I know a lot of students, I think, have fallen behind in reading and other subjects. As an example, my 7-year-old son recently was dropped from his Title I program due to not much capacity in the program. And I understand that COVID protocol is part of the reason that there's a lot of reduced capacity in that program. And he is still, quite a bit behind in his reading. He's still really not close to at grade level with his reading, but was dropped from the program due to that capacity. So I hope to see, in the coming weeks and months, the plan evolve to continue to bring students back up to speed. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for providing your public comment. And I believe we have your contact information, because the district will follow up with you. Thank you. Okay, next public comment is from Aaron. Aaron available? And again, please start with your zip code.
My zip code's 97224. I'm a mom of 2 kids in a Tigard Elementary School. My 4th grader has a medical diagnosis that makes learning and focusing in school already difficult, but especially hard with a mask. My 1st grader is below grade level in reading, and recently he was moved into the response to intervention program where he receives extra reading support. I was told by his teacher that he needed the support a long time ago, as he isn't making progress. However, they couldn't add him in due to there being too many kids. This, coupled with low capacity due to COVID restrictions on cohort size, didn't allow my son to get the services he really needed. This restriction on cohort size hopefully will go away as soon as possible, as many kids need to catch up, as stated in a recent email from the Foundation for Tigard-Tualatin Schools. Next, I want to address masks. Even though you have decided to lift the indoor face covering rule, I'm concerned about the messaging that kids will be getting from staff and teachers that may still push kids to wear masks, as we've already seen in anticipation of this lifting of the indoor mask rule from teachers. And previously, when the outdoor mask mandate was dropped, our students were still told to keep a mask on outside, and that they couldn't play football without a mask on because they were too close to other students. And my son was also told, "Are you trying to give everyone COVID?" when he took his mask off outside to get some fresh air after playing football. Masks and our current vaccinations did little to stop the transmission of the Omicron variant, and it's essential that we acknowledge that the majority of children have always been low risk and are now extremely low risk based on the natural immunity Omicron has given us and the vaccines that teachers, staff, and students have all had the opportunity to get. The benefit to mask wearing is no longer there, and I'm concerned about the psychological harms masks and mask policing have caused children. I'm hoping that teachers will get the clear message that they should be positive about removing their masks and not guilting or shaming kids for removing them. And hopefully they won't be punished or guilt children by giving them more rules in exchange for not wearing a mask and not being vaccinated, such as having to separate all the desks or not getting to be next to their friends. I read in the guidelines, you'll gather people who are up to date with their COVID vaccine and people who are not up to date And I'm just not sure if that means that kids will be segregated or singled out based on their vaccination status, which is not necessary given the widespread natural immunity and vaccination in our community and the low risk that kids have to COVID. I'm also worried about the 3-foot rule as it's just a guideline and there's no real science to back that up. I would hope that staff don't tell children to just keep away from each other, as I feel like that's damaging to their social emotional well-being. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for your public comment. With that, we'll go to Chris. It's good to see you, Chris. Yeah, you too.
Hello, my zip code is 97224. Dr. Sue, Chairman Bowman and the board. My name is Chris Hill, and I'm an educator in a nearby district who also tonight made the same decision as you guys in regards to masks. And I also have children at Durham Elementary. I'm here today because I want to affirm you in this decision to align with ODE and OHA to make masks optional without contact tracing. This is the right thing to do. For far too long, we've not made the social and mental health of children a priority. Now's the time. We need to be celebrating this day, celebrating how hard we've worked and where we've arrived. It's now imperative that we clearly communicate with all 4 pillars what their expectations are, regardless of their beliefs on masking. The reason I bring this up is because when guidelines have changed in the past, like masking outside at recess, the communication has been minimal to none for the students in the school. Staff have been confused or unaware of what the new guidelines are, and this misguidance makes children confused about the truth, ashamed, or fearful, like my 8-year-old. No matter if families decide send their children in a mask or not, all children need to be welcomed and treated fairly. We must remember to uphold the promise of every student. This means those that choose to mask or not. The last point I'll make is about masks and the potential for returning to masks if numbers jump. Requesting people to wear masks appears to be a feel-good and not actually effective. As an educator, I know very well what type of mask the majority of students wear. I can only hope that before you make that decision to return to these masks, that you'll look at peer-reviewed journals and look at the effectiveness of reducing the spread of COVID with the masks that most people wear. Is that masking actually going to make a negligible difference as you start to weigh the difference that masks make in the social emotional health of these students? So thank you again for your time. I appreciate all the work you guys have put into this. Ben Bowman, good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
And thanks for your support on OASC.
Absolutely. With that, we'll go to Joshua, and Diane is on deck.
Good evening. So zip code's 97224. I'll keep it pretty brief. First, I just wanted to say thank you for following the science and for having, in general, protected our children and our staff. My kids are at Tigard High School from the suffering that a lot of other states have had to go through by following the science and having masks. Following the science again with making them optional, totally fine. And you already addressed the point I was going to make about metrics. So if we could have the metrics, I understand it has to be flexible for a potential change back to be as clear as possible to the community. That's my suggestion. So across the board, wherever a person might fall on the opinion of masks, despite scientific evidence, so we know where we're going and why, and we can be assured that we're clear on why we're making certain decisions. So thank you. See you my time.
Thank you for being here. With that, Diane, followed by Janet.
My zip code is 97068. So good evening, Dr. Ricky Smith and Ben Bowman and everybody here and distinguished guests. Hello. So my name is Diane Liebrick. I'm a teacher at Tualatin High School. And first I want to say I love my job. And second, mask mandates are being lifted everywhere. And thank God for that, people. So if you've read the document, the C19science.info, you'll probably see how ineffective actually and unhealthy masking's been. But if not, some of the unhealthy things have been for kids, headaches, impaired learning, brain deoxygenation, difficulty concentrating, definitely increased anxiety, irritability, eye irritations, psychological problems, the list goes on. I know we haven't really focused on that because we were thinking we were really helping these kids. But as a teacher, I've been really concerned about what I've seen with my students. So I know we always say the science says, I would just quote that again, the science says that maybe wearing a mask isn't very safe for children. I know our state government has pushed this mandate for 2 years, and I'm so glad we're now changing a little bit and proposing optional masking. I think that's really a great thing. But let me just tell you what I've seen in my classroom. I've seen withdrawn kids. I've seen depression. I've seen a lack of social skills, huge gaps in learning. Part of that is online learning, and part of that is this masking and covering half of someone's identity. Maybe that doesn't seem like it is, but it's made a huge difference in how I see children and how they see me and how they see each other. I'm someone that smiles a lot. So when people can't see my smile, it feels like, oh my gosh, half of me is missing, right? I know that we've also really been encouraging the vaccinations. I am worried about that. I know that's a whole nother discussion. If I could put up the VAERS data, I would put it up. I'm worried about that too, but I know that's the push, is vaccinating these kids. There've been a lot of negative side effects and I worry about that, but hey, that's another conversation. I know that we also have staff members that for whatever reason, it's a small percent, who have chosen not to get vaccinated. And these staff members have been, have had to sign an additional contract just to keep their jobs. And I'm just hoping that when we lift these mandates and make things optional, we will also include those staff members as well. They've also suffered, they've also gone through hard times. And with this additional contract, they've had to be isolated. They've had to stay, they can't socialize with their staff members. So think of them as well. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Diane. And then we'll go to Janet.
You have to leave this thing on?
Please keep going. We can hear you.
Are you guys afraid of catching something? Okay. It appears that Tigard-Tualatin School District was having a difficult time deciding whether to keep our kids masked or letting their smiles show. It was ridiculous to even have this debate. We should never be pushing vaccines or boosters, especially based on the 9-age adverse reactions by Pfizer. Nationally, Oregon ranks 3rd from the bottom academically. That's disgraceful. Oregon children have fallen below grade level. Oregon children will not be able to compete in college or in the job market as adults. The Tigard-Tualatin website highlights that TTSD is a worrisome sign. This district has a large number of schools whose students are making less academic progress than their peers at other schools in Oregon. Masks have proven to cause anxiety and even harder for kids to learn. And what about trying to teach a child to read when they can't even see or hear the teacher enunciate words? Masks cause psychological damage to our children by forcing children to cover their faces. this school district should never be teaching our children that air is toxic and that everyone around them is sick. Masks cause a child to breathe through wet, snotty, spit-soaked masks and also cause health damage and harms a child's immune system. Children have always been safe without masks. Wearing masks have been found to be ineffective since the virus molecule goes right through the mask. ORS 339-288 flat out prohibits anything that puts pressure on a child's mouth and also prohibits any type of restraint on the child's mouth that makes it harder for them to breathe. Therefore, you are breaking the law, pushing our children to wear a mask over their face. Parents do not want their children learning pornographic sexuality education, passing condoms in class, or teaching children
Excuse me,
where
Janet.
to touch on another person to make
Janet.
them sexually aroused.
Okay,
It's not
this, I'm going to adjourn this part of the meeting. This is not, okay. All right, the meeting is in recess, please. As we've stated multiple times, we have public comment sections for agenda items and a public comment section for non-agenda items, and we ask our community members to follow those approved rules. With that, we want to thank all of our public who's come to provide public comment tonight, and we do have your contact information, so there may be follow-ups on a couple of those items. Okay, with that, we will move to our report and discussion item, part 2, 2022-2023 school year calendar proposal, options A and B. This is a first reading, so there'll be no vote tonight. Presenters, Director Debbie Ebert and Director Tracy Rose.
For our calendar for the 22-23 school year. You can see the bulleted list of commonalities for both option A and option B, which have gone out to staff for a vote. And the only difference between the two is swapping a non-contract day the day before Thanksgiving versus adding a day at the end of the year. So those really are the only differences between the two calendars. And you also notice that we did put the disclaimer on that this is pending negotiations with TTEA. So other than that, it really does follow, our traditional calendar that we've had for the last many years.
Looks like overwhelming support from staff on option 1. Questions from the board or comments, particularly parents, perhaps, if you have thoughts?
So we had a grand total of 211 participants. Roughly 2/3 of those look like they were licensed and 1/3 of those were classified. Is that about the right breakdown?
Yes.
Was that less less response than you were hoping for? I
Yes.
assume it seems like a low number.
Keeping in mind, we also had the mask survey out at the same time.
That was gonna be my question. Was that the reason that you suspect that we didn't get as good? People had surveyed for fatigue.
Chair Bowman and directors, also as part of this board agenda item, I provided the religious holidays calendar for the 22-23 school year. We had started this conversation a year ago for the previous calendar when Rosh Hashanah started the first day of school. So I also provided with you an example of Seattle Public Schools and what they have on their website relative to how they honor religious holidays for your consideration and possible discussion at another time, or we could take your direction on what you'd like us to provide to you for more information.
Could you walk, I think we've had this conversation at previous board members, but if a student is observing one of these religious holidays, what does the protocol look like for them? They basically have that day as an excused absence, and then, you know.
At this time, I don't believe we have any formal process.
So, okay. So would that require board action? Or do we need a formal process, I guess? Like, or do we need to find out more information from students and families perhaps?
From what I see here with Seattle Public, they have formalized it. Their website, their webpage around religion in schools is very clear. They link to a couple of their state rules. So whether that's board policy or we need to do a little bit more research.
Sure. That's something we might look into.
Chair, I do think it provides us with an opportunity to engage our families relative, and this may also be either something that we can fold into the strategic process, planning process, or it may be a separate work session and listening session with families relative to this practice. But I think taking a look at, and I appreciate Director Rose bringing forward Washington School Superintendents for Public Instruction. Their guidance, I think, is one of the most complete that we have seen relative to, rather than trying to accommodate everything within the calendar, there's a blanket statement and policies that are in place the districts can follow to support their families who have those individualized needs.
And I would just add that that ties nicely into one of Henry's comments that on his update with working with families and students when they are celebrating Ramadan and specific places for lunches that are separate. So I think that like those conversations are really important ones to be having, kind of tying that along with holiday calendars and all of that. I think would be a great conversation to have as a board.
Our initial first step last year had been to try to stay off of those holidays for plays and extracurricular activities and parent meetings and so on and so forth.
So way back when, before COVID, we started having a 2-year calendar, and that obviously got derailed badly when we barely knew what we were doing a month from now, let alone next year. Is it your hope that we'll get back to that 2-year calendar cycle after this next year? Do you want to answer that? Or are you thinking of one year at a time approach is going to be on our process?
I'm sorry, I'm not
Are we-
hearing 2 years.
Are we going to continue doing a 1 year at a time calendar, or are we going to go back to trying to do a multiple?
We are hoping to go back to multiple years.
So this is sort of a hoping that everything stays in the trajectory we think that it's going, and then next spring we would start doing the 2-year calendar again.
Yes.
So I think parents, families really appreciated knowing that part of it, and I'm sure staff did too.
Yeah, we've received that feedback from all stakeholders. Yeah.
I'm seeing our teacher union rep nodding his head. So. Excellent.
I do have one question related to calendar. Not technically, but I think importantly, summer programs. We have continued funding for those programs for the next 2 years.
We have them, we actually, yes, and potentially more. That will be in an update to the board, and we're happy to bring a broader report to you along with Director Robson relative to the summer program. The state will be providing $100 million for this summer to be dispersed by ADM out to districts. We anticipate, Director Moore, about $2 million, thank you, $2 million that will come to the district. While it can be spent all the way out to January 1st, it's meant to be so totally spent during the summer for K-8 academic enrichment, and as well as a recovery. And relative to our earlier comment this evening, there is a great deal that is being done relative to supporting students and helping them to recover, as well as credit recovery at the high school level. And so we expect that we will have to then use our ESSER dollars for the 25% match that is required for that grant. That also includes $50 million to go out to community partners to provide the childcare again this summer. So as I shared at the last PSO meeting last week, I said we're the best deal in town for summer activities. You know, free transportation, free meals, and great learning that goes on during the summer.
That's awesome. And so will those programs be going on throughout summer at different timelines and intervals?
Correct. Yes. And like I said, when Director Robson and his team have this year, we learned a great deal last year. As you remember, we served over 1,200 students K-8 and close to 100 students at the 9 through 12 level in terms of credit recovery and credit completion. And so we will rinse and repeat this year with some tweaks. But again, this is kudos to a staff who came off a brutal year and stepped right into summer learning. And having walked through those programs with Director Robson, it was truly amazing and wonderful to see.
That's awesome.
So that will continue.
We'll look forward to that report. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, so actually your comment makes me wonder if we know the dates of those summer programs, is there any way we could put those on the calendar so that families would know here's when a summer program will be offered, whether it's like the more the sort of enrichment one we did last summer, or if it's the credit recovery one, so that families can plan for those, if that's possible. I know sometimes those don't come together for the summer programs in time to make a calendar, but boy, it sure would be cool to do the two together.
Do they start in June at all?
This on, okay. Yes, that is at the forefront of everybody's initial question to us is when, which I love because that is, I love the enthusiasm. Folks are in tune with moving forward with extending learning and opportunities. So we have had two initial summer planning meetings coming now with great news from the state that we were waiting for that funding information. And then with that now, we've already got our program leads and additional staff who have come to the table and are starting down the path of planning programming from last year. And then now with the funding opportunities that we see from the state, we're going to be jumping into what that K-8 enrichment, and yes, getting the dates out as soon as possible. So folks can, we have a little longer runway this year, and that's exciting. So yeah, it's coming very soon.
I also wish to bring to the board's attention and relative to a report that Director Robson provided to ODE and COSA as they were advocating to the legislature for summer development money, summer school money, and it was used as the anchor for their advocacy.
Great. Do you have a question? Director Irvin.
And
oh,
I'm just.
Sorry about that. I just saw Vice Chair Lynn. Vice Chair Lynn will go after Director Irvin.
So I remember on the comments, there were several teachers and staff members that had just the question about aligning them with bigger districts like Portland Public, because we have a significant amount of teachers that live in other districts. And so my question isn't why we are, but are those considerations that are looked at kind of down the road to try and align those for the cohesion of staff members that live in other districts? Or is that just too crazy of a thing to even?
Yeah, we have many, we have families all over the metro area that I don't have any data to say that the majority of our staff are living in the Portland area and go to PPS. We would have to pull that, and I don't even know that we have a way to pull that.
Yeah, we have run reports on the schedules of other districts around us. Each year when we're looking at the calendar, we're also looking to expand our year. So yeah, those are all considerations.
And it's a mixed bag of starting before Labor Day and starting after Labor Day. It's really a mix.
And they also totally, I feel like you're fixing one thing and creating other issues.
Yeah.
So that was a comment that came up several times. So I was just curious what the sort of thought was around that, not that you to go one way or the other. I was curious. And that's all.
I'm sure this is in the report, but now I can't remember if I read it or not. There it is. All right, Vice Chair Lynn.
Yeah. So this is the first time I think I've had a chance to look at this and respond to it as a board member. And so one of the questions I had is just around the process in terms of how all of this gets decided. You know, for example, as a parent, I wonder to what extent do parents have any input? And if not, is that because it's a contractual thing between the district and the teachers union or what? Could you explain to me sort of how this gets determined?
Sure. So most of our calendar is determined by our contracts and the number of days that we have negotiated with our unions, both licensed and classified. So we have a number of holidays that are contracted. We also have a number of work days and in-service days, pre-service days. All of that is in our contract. And so we start with that kind of being the bedrock of the calendar. And then the things that we can survey on, we do. But the contract really does dictate how we kind of set this up. We have a 190-day contract with our teachers, so we have to count back from, and make sure that we've hit 190 days and included all the paid holidays and all the work and in-service days. Conference days are also in the contract.
So like that Wednesday before Thanksgiving, is that also part of that?
No, that's an option. So we can utilize that day as a non-contract day, but then we have to tack on that day somewhere else because that ends up not being a paid day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So will this be on the next board meeting agenda for adoption?
That's our plan, right? Next week?
Next week.
Yeah, next week, 3 weeks in a row.
Yes, sorry about that.
Any other questions? Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I guess to follow up, I would say that, where possible, to get some parent input. I know that, and that's why I think having the information about what's contractual is important. But if outside of that, if parents have an opportunity to give input, I think that'd be great. And maybe students as well. I don't know how, but yeah.
Okay, other comments, questions? All right, with that, thank you, directors, very much. And we will move to our second public comment of the evening. This is for non-agenda items. And I believe we just have one person signed up, but I want to go check and make sure. All right, is Lenore in the room? Okay, I do not see Lenore. Then with that, we will adjourn the meeting at 8:38 p.m.